Greetings. My name is Abraham Lincoln. I was the 16th President of the United States of America. Many people say I'm the most recognizable president of the 45 presidents who have served our great nation. I don't know about that, but I do know there are some things that set me apart from the other 44. One of those is that from the sole of my feet to the top of my head measures 6 feet 4 inches. That makes me the tallest president to ever serve our great nation. I was the first president to grow a full beard. I never joined an organized church, but I do read my Bible every day. Oftentimes, I would attend church with Mrs. Lincoln. I don't drink alcohol, and I don't smoke or chew tobacco. I was born in Hardin County, Kentucky on February 12th of 1809 to Thomas and Nancy Hanks Lincoln. I have an older sister, Sarah, who is 2 years older than me. I had a younger brother named Thomas, but he died as a baby. My father farmed in Hardin County, Kentucky, and it was a lot of hard work. Now, I would help him when I got old enough, but I didn't really like hard labor. There was a group of teachers who came through our county. They were on their way to St. Joseph, Missouri to join a wagon train heading to Oregon and California. Well, they stayed in our county long enough to teach us children how to read. Well, once they did that, my whole world opened up. I couldn't get enough books. I read Aesop's Fables. I read Robinson Crusoe. I read the King James Bible. I read everything I could about our first president, George Washington. Well, long about 1816, my father moved us across the Ohio River into southern Indiana. Southern Indiana, or Indiana as a whole, was a non-slaveholding state. And my father had a spiritual and a moral problem with one man owning another man as property, and I did as well. Well, 2 years after we had moved over there, on October 5th of 1818, my mother died of milk poisoning. I was only 9 years old. Turns out our milk cow had gotten into a pasture with a plant called a white snake root and had eaten that plant, and it poisoned the milk. And my mother drank the milk and she got sick and she died. Well, there were a lot of people that died of milk poisoning. Well, that left my sister Sarah, who was only 11, to raise our family of myself, my father, and my mother's 19-year-old cousin, Dennis Hanks, who had lost his parents. Well, on December 2nd of 1819, just a year after my mother died, my father married Sarah, they called her Sally, Johnston. She was from Elizabethtown, Kentucky, near where I was born. She had lost her husband, and she had 3 little boys. Well, I lived the rest of my youth out in southern Indiana. In 1830, my father moved us into Illinois to a little village just west of Decatur, Illinois. Well, I was 21 at the time, and I was old enough to strike out on my own, and that's just what I did. I decided to go up the Sangamon River to a little settlement called New Salem, Illinois. There, another gentleman and I opened up a general dry goods store, and that might be one of the stories you may have heard about me. One night I was closing up the store and counting the cash drawer, and I realized that I had not given a woman all of her change. Well, I closed up the store early that night, and I walked 6 miles to return the woman's 3 pennies that I had not paid her. Well, people found out about that, and they started calling me Honest Abe. Maybe you've heard that story about me or that phrase about me. I did that for about 2 years, and then I had read so many books on politics and the law, I decided to become a lawyer and a politician. Well, there was a seat open on the Illinois General Assembly, and so I ran for that seat, and I ran on the platform of anti-slavery because I really didn't think it was right that one man should own another man as property. And also, I didn't think it was right that women didn't have the right to vote. So I ran on those two platforms, and I was elected at age 25 to the Illinois House of Representatives, and I served there for 8 years. Upon completing that 8 years of service, I went to Springfield to open up a law practice with John T. Stewart, who happened to be the cousin of a woman named Mary Todd. Well, it didn't take too long until in October of 1842, Mary Todd and I were married. Well, we had 4 children. We had Robert, we had Edward, we called Eddie, we had William, who we called Willie, and we had Thomas, who we called Tad. Well, Eddie died of tuberculosis when he was only 4 years old, and Willie passed away when he was 12 years old. We were serving in the White House at the time. Well, along about 1846, I had the desire to run for a seat in the United States House of Representatives. And there again, I wanted to join my platform to the anti-slavery and women's rights to vote. Another congressman and I actually wrote a bill, drafted a bill, an anti-slavery bill. Well, we didn't have the votes to bring it all the way to a law, so we did abandon that, but I didn't give up the desire to see that someday slaves would be free. Well, in the late 1850s, I had the desire to run for the United States presidency, so that's what I did. And there again, I ran on the platform of anti-slavery. It just was not right, morally or spiritually, for one man to own another man as property. Well, I won that seat, and I won the presidency of the United States on November 6th of 1860. I served as the president during the American Civil War, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that later, about the Civil War, but right now I'd like to tell you a little bit about some of the pets that I enjoyed while I was at the White House. Mrs. Lincoln was asked by a reporter one day if I had any hobbies. Well, immediately she said, well, he sure loves cats. Well, I couldn't argue with that. I do love cats. I could play with them for hours, actually. I had 2 favorite cats, one named Tabby and one named Dixie. Now, Mrs. Lincoln didn't like it, but I always allowed those cats to eat at the table at the White House. Another story about cats was near the end of the Civil War. I went to near one of the battlefields to visit our Northern Commander, General Grant. And I was in a telegraph booth, and I noticed 3 baby kittens over in the corner. And I reached over and picked them up and put them in my lap, and I was playing with them. And I asked about their mother. Well, I was told that their mother had died. Well, before I left that telegraph booth that day, I made sure that they had plenty of milk to eat, milk to drink, food to eat, and they had a nice warm place to stay and be well taken care of. Another animal that I liked at the White House was my dog named Fido. Now, the night I was elected president, there were so many fireworks and cannon fire and so much noise that Fido was very, very scared. And it took us a while to find out where he was at. This was in Springfield, Illinois. Well, Mrs. Lincoln and I realized that Fido was not going to be able to go to Washington, D.C. with us because of all the noise there would be. So I contacted our neighbor boys and asked them if they would take care of Fido while we were in Washington. And they said they would. But I made them agree that if Fido came in the house with mud on his paws, that they wouldn't yell at him. And if he wanted to eat at the table, that they would allow him to eat at the table. Mrs. Lincoln and I even carried a couch over to their house so Fido would feel more at home. We had many, many pets in the White House. We had rabbits. We had 2 goats. Willie and Tad especially liked to tie ropes to the goats and onto the chairs and pull them through the White House. And Mrs. Lincoln didn't particularly like that either. Another animal that I particularly liked was a turkey. Well, in October of 1863, I wanted to have our nation observe a day of thanksgiving and praise and call it Thanksgiving Day, the last Thursday in November. Well, I made a proclamation to that point, and there was a turkey that was sent to the White House, and Tad got especially attached to that turkey. So attached, he named him Jack. Well, one day in a cabinet meeting, I could see Jack out playing in the lawn with Tad. And Tad had figured out what was going to happen to Jack and at Thanksgiving time, and he burst into the cabinet meeting and pleaded with me not to butcher Jack. Well, I left that cabinet meeting early, and I went out to the garden, and I pardoned Jack, and that began the first presidential pardoning of the Thanksgiving turkey. Well, I want to get back now to the Civil War and all it pertained to. Like I say, I was elected November 6th of 1860, and there were many of the southern states who were very upset that I had got elected, mainly because I was going to do something about the slavery issue. They were so upset that they actually left the United States of America. Those states were South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. They all left the United States even before I took office on March 4th of 1861. Well, I hadn't been in office 3 months before 4 more states joined them: Arkansas, Virginia, Tennessee, and North Carolina. They formed the 11-state Confederacy. Well, on April 12th of 1861, the Confederacy fired on Fort Sumter, South Carolina, and that was the beginning of the American Civil War. And the Civil War lasted from April 12th of 1861 to April 9th of 1865. It was a dark time in our history. Over 600,000 people were killed during that time. In September of 1862, I wrote a proclamation called the Emancipation Proclamation. Now, I know those are 2 big, long words, but they basically mean a paper to free the slaves. And that became, in effect, a proclamation on January 1st of 1863. And all slaves that were being held could be free. They could walk away from their plantation or where they lived, and they could leave. They could go north. Some of them went north, and they actually took up arms against the Confederacy and formed black regiments. Well, there was a particular battle that's very famous in the Civil War in Pennsylvania. It was called the Battle of Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. And November 19th of 1863, I went there to deliver a speech, which is a short speech. It's only 272 words long and about 3 minutes to deliver. It's turned out over the years that it is the most recognized speech of all speeches ever given. And I'd like to recite that for you now. 87 years ago, our fathers brought forth on this continent a new nation, conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. Now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived or so dedicated can long endure. We are met on a great battlefield of that war. We have come here to dedicate a portion of that field to those who here gave their lives that that nation might live. It is altogether fitting and proper that we should do this. But in a larger sense, we cannot dedicate, we cannot consecrate, we cannot hallow this ground. The brave men, living and dead, who fought here, who struggled here, have consecrated it far above our poor power to add or detract. The world will little note nor long remember what we say here, but it can never forget what they did here. It is for us, the living, rather, to be dedicated here to the unfinished work for which they who fought here have thus far so nobly advanced. It is rather for us to be here dedicated to the great task remaining before us, that from these honored dead we take increased devotion to that great cause for which they gave the last full measure of devotion, that we highly resolve that dead shall not have died in vain, that this nation under God shall have a new birth of freedom, and the government of the people, by the people, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. Thank you for watching, and may God bless the United States of America.